He lifted his glass and smiled. Right there in front of everyone. She's the future, Dominic said, pulling Isabella closer. The room went quiet. Not shocked, just watching. Because there was one person missing. Charlotte, his wife. But wait, that wasn't even the strange part. Because just hours earlier, Charlotte had received something. Something she didn't react to. Something she didn't question. Something most people would panic over. But she didn't. At that moment, it didn't seem important. And that was a shocking truth. Because what Dominic didn't know, what Isabella didn't see, what everyone in that room completely missed, was already in motion. And by the time Charlotte walked into that gala, everything they thought they controlled would be gone. Charlotte Sinclair was never loud. She didn't argue. She didn't chase attention. And she definitely didn't fight for things that were already hers. That's what made people misunderstand her. They thought silence meant weakness. They thought calm meant she didn't care. But they were wrong. Charlotte lived in a world where everything looked perfect. A luxury penthouse, private drivers, quiet dinners with soft music and city lights glowing through glass walls. And Dominic, her husband, powerful, respected, admired. At least, that's what everyone believed. Every morning, Charlotte woke up before him, not because she had to, but because she liked the silence. She would sit by the window with her coffee, watching the city slowly come alive. It was her moment, her peace. But there was something about her routine people didn't notice. She always checked her phone, not messages, not social media, emails, quietly, carefully, like she was watching something, waiting. But no one asked, and she never explained. Dominic, on the other hand, was always busy. Calls, meetings, deals. He moved fast, spoke fast, lived like everything had to happen now. And slowly, that difference began to show. At first, it was small. Missed dinners, late nights, short replies. Work is crazy, he would say. And Charlotte? She would just nod, smile. Okay. She never questioned him, never pushed, never complained. And that was her flaw. Not because she was weak, but because she observed more than she spoke. Because, while Dominic was explaining things, Charlotte was noticing them. The change in his tone, the way he avoided eye contact, the way his phone was always face down. And then there was the name, Isabella. It showed up once, just once, on his phone screen. A message, nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just a name. But something about it stayed, and Charlotte didn't ask. That was the part most people wouldn't understand. She didn't confront him, didn't react, didn't even bring it up, because she had already started thinking. And once Charlotte started thinking, she didn't stop. Days passed, then weeks, and Dominic changed more, colder, more distant, more confident, like someone who believed they had already moved on even before leaving. And then came the invitation, a corporate gala, big, public, important. Dominic's event. He mentioned it casually. You should come, he said. But he didn't look at her, and that told her everything. Because Charlotte understood something most people ignore. When someone invites you without meaning it, they're already planning for you not to be there. So she smiled, softly. I'll see, she replied. And that was it. No argument, no emotion, just silence. But behind that silence, something had already started shifting. Because earlier that same day, Charlotte received an email. Short, direct, important. The kind of message that changes everything. But she didn't react, didn't panic, didn't even reread it. She just closed her phone, took a sip of her coffee, and looked out at the city again. Calm, too calm, because what that message contained, what it confirmed, what it set into motion, would destroy everything Dominic thought he was building. But he didn't know that, not yet, and neither did Isabella. And that's what made it dangerous. Because while they were moving loudly, Charlotte was moving silently. And in her world, silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. And that night, as the city lights flickered on and the gala got closer, Charlotte made one quiet decision. She would attend, not to fight, not to explain, but to end something completely, because sometimes the most powerful move isn't reacting, it's waiting. And what Dominic didn't understand, what Isabella never saw coming, was that Charlotte wasn't being replaced. She was stepping aside on purpose, because everything they thought they were taking was never theirs to begin with, and very soon they were about to find out why. But everything was about to change. The first time Charlotte noticed something was wrong, it wasn't dramatic, no loud argument, no clear betrayal, just a small moment, easy to ignore. Dominic's phone rang during dinner. He didn't pick up. That wasn't strange. But then it rang again, and again, and again. Same name, Isabella. Charlotte didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She could feel it, the shift, the tension, the hesitation. But she said nothing. And that was the moment things started changing. Because silence in situations like this reveals more than questions ever could. Work, Dominic said quickly, too quickly. Charlotte nodded. Okay. And just like that, the conversation ended. But the story didn't, because the phone didn't stop. Even later that night, it kept ringing, vibrating, lighting up the dark room. And Dominic, he stepped out to answer it. That was new. That was different. That was a mistake. But Charlotte didn't follow him, didn't listen, didn't check. She just stayed in bed, eyes open, thinking, because something wasn't adding up, and she knew it. The next few days felt off, not obvious, just enough to feel wrong. Dominic started dressing differently, more careful, more intentional, like he was trying to impress someone, but not her. He smiled at his phone more, typed longer messages, stayed up later. And every time Charlotte walked in, the screen would go dark. But wait, it gets worse. Because one evening, Charlotte saw something she wasn't supposed to see. Dominic left his phone on the table, unlocked, just for a second, just long enough. A message popped up from Isabella. I can't wait to see you tonight. Charlotte read it, and then she looked away. No reaction, no confrontation, nothing. That was her pattern. Observe, process, wait, because reacting too early means losing control. And Charlotte never liked losing control. But something else started happening. The calls became more frequent, the messages more urgent, the distance more obvious. And Dominic, he stopped trying to hide it properly. That's what confidence does. It makes people careless. And that carelessness always exposes something. Are you coming to the gala? He asked one night. Again, casually, like it didn't matter. Charlotte looked at him, really looked at him this time. And for a brief moment, he avoided her eyes. That was all she needed. I'll see, she said again. Same tone, same calmness, same silence. But inside, something had already shifted. Because Charlotte understood something very clearly now. This wasn't just distance. This wasn't just distraction. This was replacement. And the worst part? Dominic wasn't even hiding it anymore. He was preparing, planning, moving forward, like she was already gone. But she wasn't. Not yet. Because while Dominic was building something new, Charlotte was quietly watching it form, piece by piece, step by step. And she was learning who Isabella was, learning how often they met, learning where Dominic spent his time, not by spying, not by chasing, but by paying attention. Because people reveal everything when they think no one is looking. And Charlotte, she was always looking, but she didn't act. Not yet, because she was waiting for something bigger, something final. And then it came, another message, not from Dominic, not from Isabella, but something else, something official, something important, the same sender as before. And this time, the subject line said everything. Charlotte opened it. Read it once, slowly, then again, just to be sure. And then she smiled, not happily, not emotionally, but knowingly, because everything she suspected was now confirmed. And more importantly, everything she needed was now in place. She locked her phone, placed it gently on the table, and looked at Dominic, still talking, still distracted, still unaware, because while he thought he was moving ahead, he had already stepped into something irreversible, and he didn't even know it. That was the moment everything started falling apart. The gala was getting closer, and everything around Charlotte felt slower, quieter, like the world was holding its breath. Dominic, on the other hand, was moving faster than ever. More calls, more meetings, more time away, and now, less pretending. He no longer explained his absence, didn't bother with excuses, didn't even try to act normal. And that told Charlotte something important. He believed it was already over, but it wasn't, not yet, because Charlotte hadn't made her move. And until she did, nothing was finished. One afternoon, she decided to go out, not for distraction, not for comfort, but for clarity. She walked into one of Dominic's company offices, unannounced, uninvited, and yet no one stopped her. That was interesting, very interesting, because the staff recognized her, respected her, even feared her slightly. But they also looked confused, like they hadn't seen her in a long time, like she had been absent, but she hadn't. She had just been quiet. And there's a difference. As she walked through the building, she noticed something else. New faces, new energy, new tension. And then she saw her, Isabella, standing near the glass conference room, confident, elegant, laughing, like she belonged there, like she had already taken Charlotte's place. Charlotte paused, just for a second, watching, observing, and then Isabella turned. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, something shifted. Not fear, not guilt, just recognition. Like Isabella understood something she couldn't explain. And Charlotte? She simply smiled, soft, controlled, unreadable. Then she walked away. No confrontation, no drama, nothing, because this wasn't the moment. But wait, this is where it gets interesting, because as Charlotte stepped into the elevator, she pulled out her phone, opened the email again, and looked at one specific line, a detail, a small sentence most people would ignore, but not her, because that line changed everything. It confirmed ownership, authority, control, and more importantly, timing. And then she exhaled slowly, silence, because in that moment, Charlotte realized something powerful. The gala wasn't just an event. It was a stage, a final stage. And Dominic, he was walking straight into it, unaware, unprepared, completely exposed. But Charlotte didn't rush, didn't react, didn't interfere, because timing is what turns information into power. And she was waiting for the perfect moment. That night, Dominic came home late, again, but this time, he didn't even acknowledge her properly. Just a quick glance, a distracted hey, and straight to his room, like she was invisible, like she didn't matter, like she was already replaced. And Charlotte, she watched him go, quietly, carefully, because every action he took now was confirming one thing. He had no idea who he was dealing with, because if he did, he would have stopped. He would have slowed down. He would have paid attention. But he didn't, and that was his biggest mistake. Because the woman he thought he understood, the woman he thought he replaced, the woman he believed had no power, was about to show him something he would never forget. But not yet, not here, not now, because the real moment was still coming. And when it arrived, there would be no going back. But that wasn't even the worst part. The day of the gala arrived, and everything felt different. Not louder, not chaotic, just heavier, like something unseen was building. Dominic was already dressed before sunset. Sharp suit, perfect tie, confident posture. He looked like a man who had already won. And maybe in his mind, he had. Isabella was arriving separately. That mattered, because tonight wasn't just personal. It was public, strategic, calculated. Dominic wasn't just replacing Charlotte. He was announcing it to everyone. And that was the part that made it dangerous, because public decisions come with public consequences. But wait, here's where everything changed. Charlotte was in a hurry. She didn't rush to get ready, didn't call anyone, didn't ask questions. She moved slowly, deliberately, like someone who already knew the ending. Her dress was simple, elegant, nothing loud, nothing attention-seeking, but it carried something else, authority, the kind you don't need to prove. And before she left, she checked her phone one last time. That same email, that same confirmation, that same line, still there, still valid, still powerful. She locked the screen and walked out. Meanwhile, the gala had already begun. Lights, music, champagne glasses clinking, soft conversations floating through the air, board members, investors, media, all in one room, waiting, watching, because Dominic had hinted at something big, something new. And when Dominic Sinclair promises something new, people pay attention. Then he walked in, confident, smiling, and right beside him, Isabella. She looked flawless, perfectly dressed, perfectly positioned, her hand resting lightly on his arm, like she belonged there, like she had always belonged there. Whispers filled the room, soft, curious, speculative. Is that? Wait, where's Charlotte? But no one said it out loud, because power protects silence. And Dominic, he loved it. The attention, the control, the moment. He stepped forward, took the microphone, and the room slowly quieted. This evening, he began, calm, confident, marks a new chapter. And just like that, everything shifted, because those words weren't just about business. They were about replacement, about transition, about erasing something or someone. Isabella smiled slightly, proud, certain, but she didn't know. That was the problem. She didn't know, because while Dominic was speaking, while the room was watching, while the moment was building, someone else had just arrived. Quietly, no announcement, no noise, no attention. Charlotte. She stepped into the room like she had never left, calm, composed, unbothered, and for a second, no one noticed. But then, someone did. A board member, then another, then another. The whispers changed. The air shifted, because something felt off. Dominic hadn't seen her yet, still speaking, still building his moment, still unaware. And Isabella? She followed his gaze, focused on him, smiling, until she noticed a change in the room, the eyes moving, the attention shifting, the silence growing. That's when she turned and saw her, Charlotte, standing there, watching, not angry, not emotional, just present. And that presence alone disrupted everything, because power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just walks in and changes the room. Dominic paused, mid-sentence, confused, because suddenly no one was looking at him anymore. And that's when he followed their gaze and saw her, Charlotte. And for the first time that night, his confidence cracked, just slightly, but enough, because something about her presence felt wrong, unexpected, unplanned. And Dominic hated unplanned things. But this was just the beginning. Because what happened next, no one was prepared for. Dominic stared at Charlotte, trying to understand, trying to adjust, trying to recover. But something inside him already knew this wasn't normal. This wasn't coincidence. This was something else. Charlotte, he said slowly, forcing a smile. But it didn't reach his eyes. You came. Simple words, but loaded, because he hadn't expected her to. He hadn't planned for this, and that was his first mistake. Charlotte didn't respond immediately. She didn't rush, didn't react. She just walked forward, step by step, calm, controlled, and every step she took made the room quieter, until she stood right in front of him, close enough to speak. But she didn't. Not yet, because timing matters. Then she looked at Isabella, just for a moment, soft, unthreatening, almost kind. and that confused her, because this wasn't the reaction she expected. No anger, no jealousy, no scene, just calm. And that calm was terrifying. But wait, here's the shocking part. Charlotte reached for the microphone, and Dominic hesitated just for a second. But in that second, he realized something. He had already lost control. She took it, turned to the audience, and spoke, softly, clearly, "Good evening." The room listened, every single person, because something about her voice felt final. "I won't take much of your time," she continued. "Simple, direct, but I believe—" She paused, looked at Dominic, then back at the room. That clarity matters. And that's when it started. Not loudly, not dramatically, but precisely. Charlotte reached into her bag, pulled out a document, clean, official, undeniable, and handed it, not to Dominic, but to one of the board members. That detail mattered, because this wasn't personal anymore. This was business, legal, final. The board member opened it, read, then froze. Another took it, then another, and suddenly the energy in the room changed. Completely, Dominic noticed. Of course he did. "What is this?" he asked, trying to sound calm, trying to stay in control. But his voice slipped. Charlotte finally looked at him, and this time there was something different. Not anger, not sadness, just truth. "That," she said quietly, "is ownership." Silence. Heavy, uncomfortable, unavoidable, because in that moment, everything connected. That email, that silence, that patience, that strategy, it all led here. Dominic shook his head slightly. No, that's not possible. But it was, because Charlotte wasn't explaining. She was confirming. "You built the company," she continued. "Calm, measured, but you never owned it." Pause. Just long enough. For the past 5 years. Another pause. "I have been the majority shareholder." And just like that, everything broke. The illusion, the control, the power, all gone. Isabella stepped back slightly, confused, lost, because the man she thought had everything had nothing. And Dominic, he finally understood. Too late, because that call he ignored, that distance he created, that woman he underestimated, was his last chance. And he let it go. And effective immediately, Charlotte said, "You are removed." No emotion, no anger, just finality. And in that moment, everything changed forever. The silence didn't break immediately. It stretched, heavy, uncomfortable, like the room itself was trying to process what just happened. Dominic stood there, still, frozen, not because he didn't understand, but because he finally did. And that realization, it hit harder than anything Charlotte had said. Around him, the board members were no longer looking at him the same way. No more respect, no more quiet agreement, just distance, professional, cold, final. Some of them stood up, not dramatically, not rushed, just decisively. And that was worse, because when powerful people move quietly, it means a decision has already been made. Dominic opened his mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to explain, maybe to fix something that couldn't be fixed. But no words came out, because for the first time, he had nothing, no control, no authority, no leverage. And slowly, that confidence he walked in with disappeared, right in front of everyone. Isabella looked at him, really looked at him this time, not with admiration, not with pride, but with confusion, then doubt, then something else. Distance, because the truth had shifted everything. The man she thought she was standing beside wasn't who she believed. And worse, he wasn't powerful anymore. She stepped back, just slightly, but that small movement said everything. Because loyalty built on illusion never survives reality. But wait, this part matters. Because Charlotte didn't celebrate, didn't smile, didn't look satisfied. She simply stood there, calm, composed, like this was never about revenge. And in truth, it wasn't. It was about balance, correction, closure. She turned to the board, gave a small nod, professional, respectful, and they understood immediately because they had always known. They were just waiting for her, not him, and that realization destroyed whatever Dominic had left because the power he thought he had was never his. It was hers. All along, Charlotte placed the microphone back, gently, no sound, no drama, just the silence. Then she looked at Dominic one last time, and in that look, there was no anger, no pain, no regret, just clarity. You should have paid attention, she said quietly, not as an insult, not as revenge, but as truth, because everything he needed to understand had always been in front of him. He just chose not to see it. And that was the difference between them. Dominic reacted. Charlotte observed. Dominic rushed. Charlotte waited. Dominic assumed. Charlotte knew. And that difference changed everything. She turned and began to walk away. Not fast, not slow, just steady, like someone who had already moved on long before this moment. Behind her, the room slowly came back to life. But it wasn't the same. The energy had shifted. The power had shifted. Everything had changed. Dominic remained where he was, still trying to catch up to a reality that had already passed him. And Isabella, she didn't follow him, didn't stand beside him, didn't say anything, because now there was nothing left to stand beside, only truth, and truth is never negotiable. Sometimes the loudest people in the room aren't the ones in control. Sometimes the quiet ones are simply waiting for the right moment, the right time, the right truth, because power isn't always about what you show. Sometimes it's about what you already own. And the biggest mistake people make, they underestimate silence. They ignore it. They dismiss it. They replace it without realizing. Silence is often where the real decisions are being made. Dominic thought he was moving forward, but he was already being removed. Isabella thought she had won, but she stepped into something she didn't understand. And Charlotte, she never lost anything, because everything they tried to take was never theirs to begin with. So tell me, if you were in Charlotte's position, would you have reacted earlier? Or waited like she did?